Hello and welcome to Be the Wolf. Today I'm going to talk about something that a lot of people aren't going to want to hear, but maybe if you feel that pushback, like you don't want to hear it, maybe it means that it's something you should listen to. So I'm going to talk about this concept that if you want a life that is massively different than the one you grew up in, you're kind of fucked. And I'll go into the details of this, but think back to your childhood. Did you feel safe? Did it feel peaceful, calm, predictable? Like you could count on your caregivers? Did it feel like you were allowed to have joy and be yourself? Were you allowed to sing at the top of your lungs? Were you allowed to talk as much as you want? Or did you get that proverbial, no, be quiet, you're being too much? Or maybe it seemed like everything you did was not enough. And so when I talk about a life different than the one you grew up in, I'm talking about those kind of things. How did it feel? Because we can make a life massively different than the one we grew up in, but it doesn't mean shit if it doesn't feel different. So if you felt like you were always scrambling to get your needs met, to get attention, to get support, to get encouragement, to get acknowledged, chances are in your adult life, you're doing the same. If you didn't feel seen, heard, understood, chances are in your adult life, it's the same. And I want to talk to you about how this translates into business, relationships, maybe even health. So when you're little, I'll use my own life as an example because it's a really good example. But when you were little, when you were small, you had to get your needs met. You had no idea how reality worked. You came into this world from some other realm of something. I don't know what you believe in, but you came in from somewhere and all of a sudden you're plopped into this world of physical reality and you have to figure it out. How you get hungry and you need food. You need your diaper changed and you need that to happen because it feels uncomfortable. And the thing about this reality is it's very physical, isn't it? And being very physical, it means that we feel things. And because we feel things, some of them are good, some of them are not so good. And when we feel things that don't feel good, our natural inclination is to want to stop the bad feeling. And so that's what we do. Oh, I don't feel good. I feel maybe empty or hungry or like I'm missing something, like I need something. So we look outside of us to get it filled, to our parents. We cry if we need a bottle or a diaper change or something like that, or if something is upsetting or scares us, we will cry and try to get the attention of our caregiver. But it doesn't always work out as we hope. And so in that, we develop different strategies. So I'm going to talk to you about my life. And I'm going to talk to you. See, I grew up, some of you know, if you've been listening to me for a while, I grew up not the greatest of circumstances. There was lots of big traumas, lots of neglect, emotional abuse, physical abuse. So all of those things. And so obviously I want a life. I've always wanted a life that was different than the one that I grew up in. Always. I wanted a life that felt safe, peaceful, calm. I wanted a life that felt full of joy. I wanted to feel freedom. I didn't even know that I wanted to feel freedom, but I wanted it for sure. I wanted to feel love. And so growing up for me, I didn't feel any of those things. I had a little bit of freedom. When my mom wasn't paying attention, I could be free because she was just so caught up in her own world. But if I was in her sights, it was like shackles on, rope pulled in super tight, and the freedom was gone. And But later in my life, my stepdad came along. So my early life was very unstable. My mom was my only caregiver, and I was always having to scramble for what I needed. In fact, even when I was hungry and I would say that I was hungry, my mother would look at me and say, "It's just a figment of your imagination. You're not hungry." And so I had this mentality where my model of the world was what I felt was not the truth. What I experienced was not real. And it left me very confused and always trying to figure out, how do I get this person to love me? Because I learned that I couldn't trust myself, that what I thought and believed wasn't true because it was reinforced over and over again. And so, because of that, I really desperately clung on to what my mom said and did so that I would be safe, because she was the source of my safety. She was the source of this thing called love, or perceived love. And because I was trying to get my needs met, I bent my reality to fit into hers, or to fit into one that was in alignment with hers. And in that, I let go of the truth. I let go of the truth of what was true and real for me. But things changed when I was 9 years old. My stepdad moved in with us, and he didn't like that my mom wouldn't come home for days at a time. He didn't like that she would not come home at night after work. She was a bartender. He didn't like it. So he had a stern talking to her. I remember him yelling at her and thinking, oh my God, that's everything I've always wanted to say, but I didn't dare ever say, because the consequences would be painful. So my stepdad brought in this stability into my life. And in that stability, things settled down. So when there were two caregivers, things were more stable. When there were two. And the thing about my stepdad is, even after they got married, he was never a true parent. He was kind of like that casual fling. He was my friend. He was great. He connected with me. We had great conversations. He was fun, but he didn't lay down the rules, and he didn't play the parental role. Like, everything that I could and could not do was deferred to my mom. My mom was the rule maker. And my mom, even though she had settled down, was still the same person. Sure, she was coming home. Sure, she was not partying all the time. I mean, they still partied. They drank and smoked weed all the time, but it wasn't to the level that it was before. But everything else was the same. And so here I had this casual parent that represented love and safety and stability. And then I had this other parent who was the rule maker, and I had to follow all their rules because the consequences were dire. Now, she stopped physically abusing me when I was 8 because I threatened to call social services on her. But the framework of how my reality worked stayed the same. It was the one source of safety and love, and the casual source of safety and love. And each had different outcomes, right? My mom, the outcome was the feeling that it was never enough. No matter how hard I worked, no matter what I did, it was never enough. So the way I responded to that was, I was always thinking 18 steps ahead, trying to figure out how to make sure that she was okay, make sure her feelings were taken care of, make sure that every possible scenario of everything that could go wrong was accounted for. It was very anxious attachment style, if you follow those kind of things. Now, my stepdad, on the other hand, it was more relaxed. It was easy. But again, it was only partial, it wasn't the full thing. And so, and in fact, my stepdad was unemployed a lot in in my life, at least. And my mom was the breadwinner in those circumstances. And so there was also this sense of safety, but not full safety, love, but not full love. We'll just call it casual. Whereas mom, that relationship was committed, right? This was the source of the safety and of the love, the one source that I grew up in. So that's my model, right? Model of how my world works. And so as I got to be an adult, fuck, I was so excited to go to college so I could get away from her, get away from home. I just wanted to be as far away as possible. And I even chose the college I went to because it was farther away from home than the other one. But what started to happen was that I created a new life that looked and felt just like the old one. So as life went on and I started to have relationships in high school, most of my relationships were casual, not committed, very much like my stepdad. But the moment I really fell for a boy, like really fell for him, and he was, quote, the one that I wanted, whether I had him or not, then I would slide into that anxious way of being. I would be like, I would, drive by their house. I would call them all the time. I would be freaking out about their love being taken away because my experience of life was that love was taken away, safety was taken away constantly, constantly, constantly from the one that you want. Right. And as a kid, you have a stepdad or a step parent come in at 9 and it's great. You love them, but you still want the love of your actual parents. So for me, I was always chasing that. So in relationship, if I fell for somebody and thought they were the one, then I would act just like I acted with my mom, and all those coping mechanisms to get my needs met I would use with them. If they would pull away, I would cling on and get needier because I was afraid of losing them, because my experience was that love goes away. Love disappears for days at a time and you never know when it's going to come back. You're going to not have it, so you must hold on to it. And so then we get into my first love. And that love was similar kind of personality as my mom, and we tend to be attracted to these original models of where our needs are met. And so we're looking for safety, we're looking for peace, we're looking to have joy, we're looking to have freedom. Safety is your physical needs. Love is love and belonging, acceptance. Freedom is your sense of autonomy. And those are things that every person needs and every child needs to grow into having. And ideally, they have that, right? The freedom comes a little bit later when you're more capable of being able to handle things on your own. And so my first love was very personality wise like my mom. We tend to be attracted to those things that are familiar. And especially if you have some wounding around one of your caregivers, you're going to probably have really intense relationships with those people. So super, super chaotic. He was super push pull. He'd go out and not come home and things like that. And it sent me into all of this stuff from childhood and that same way of being. But in relationships outside of that, but in between my long-term relationships, and I didn't have very many because I repeated that pattern in most of them, that it was very stressful to be in a relationship. So I would have these long-term casual relationships, and it would be just like the stepdad: easy, comfortable, low stress, but never the full package. Casual. So I would have these committed relationships. As soon as I would be committed, I would slide into that exactly crazy way of being that I was with my mom, which was like constantly tracking, trying to figure out what they needed, trying to figure out how to make them happy so that they don't leave me. Like the whole relationship, as soon as it was committed, it became about that. But before that, it would be like stepdad, casual, arm's length, not the full package. So my second love, which was the first person I ever thought I would marry, and I never thought you could love somebody enough to want to marry them. And so it started off great, casual. I mean, we spent every day together, but emotionally it was casual. In fact, I even said in the very beginning of that relationship, you don't want to date me, I will hurt you. Keeping it at arm's length, trying to keep it like my relationship with my stepdad. But then there was this record scratch moment when we were sitting in the living room and I was working on something, and he looked up at me and said, if I had the money right now, I would marry you right now. And it was this record scratch moment of like, oh shit. So all of a sudden he now switched from casual, easy, fun, comfortable, falling in love, feeling good. Now all of a sudden he's the one. And if he's the one, that means that dynamics changes into the dynamic I had with my mom. So what I started doing was started getting needy, started worrying about him going out with his friends. Because what, does he not love me? Why doesn't he want to spend every second with me? And so I got into this role of acting just not as extreme, maybe, because his personality wasn't as similar to my mom's as the previous relationship or later relationships. So I wasn't quite as extreme in that neediness. But as soon it was locked into, this is the one thing that I'm going to have, this is my one relationship, then I started freaking out and worrying about losing it. So my actions moved from that place of preventing loss. And then later down the line, I had more relationships. Some were casual, like stepdad, and they were easy for the most part, always kept at arm's length. And some were the one. And again, every time it got locked into a box, and of course, some of those people I picked that had the personality traits as my mom that push you away and disappear and be cold, be distant, don't acknowledge you or your needs, your wants, all of those things. And so that behavior of needing to get security, needing to constantly feel like I'm validated, needing to hang on and not lose them, it made me crazy, made me do like crazy things, driving by people's houses. I don't know if kids still do that. I mean, making phone calls and hanging up, you can't really do that anymore with the way phones are. But all those things. And so this was the dynamic that played out in relationship. And it was an exact replica, one way or the other, of my early childhood. And my early childhood is, and yours too, is your model of how life works. And so, but here's the thing, it makes sense in relationships, right? Relationships, from parental relationships to love relationships. I even did this shit in friendships, same shit. Not as extreme in friendships because the intimacy is much deeper in romantic relationships. But here's where it gets wild, because my mentor always says, how you do one thing is how you do everything. And it is so true. So I learned that model of the world, right? Casual, easy, non-committal, low results, but it's safe, it's comfortable, it feels decent. If this is the thing you really want, it's going to be a push and pull. You're going to have to scramble for it. You're going to have to like work for it, and you're never going to get anywhere. That was my model of the world. So the thing I really want, which was mom, and that love from her and that safety from her, and how I'm going to get it is scramble, like work really hard for no results and basically beat my head against the wall, because that is what it felt like, because nothing was ever enough. Or casual and just not the whole package. So just a little bit. You get a taste of the thing you want, but not the whole thing. So that's how it works, right? And we're talking about parental, but it's really about what you want. The caregiver that you want, the other caregiver that you want, but one is a little bit, one is always pulling away. So you've got to chase it. Okay, so we get into jobs. Now, I started working when I was a kid because I was like, I can't rely on, essentially, I moved out of my house for a while, and then I felt like a burden in the house I was staying in. So I felt like I needed to go back to the one I want, to mom, but I couldn't rely on her. So I was old enough to rely on myself to some degree. I was 15 years old and I got a job. And for me, that was that safety, right? And I even got a little love and encouragement because I did a good job. I followed the rules. I had learned, I'd been trained well from my mom. Follow the rules, even though the rules are always changing. Follow the rules. But I loved working because the rules didn't change. So it was much easier to navigate getting my needs met through a job, right? Getting some acknowledgement, getting some love or perceived love, right? I had great relationships with some of my very early bosses. But that, so my needs were met and it was easy. And so but I had that same pattern where I would put the job first over everything. And so in high school, though, I had multiple jobs. So it was a little easier, right? It was my safety, it was my security, it was the thing that kept me safe instead of, my mom. But it was, multiple jobs. So I had multiple jobs. It was kind of casual, right? I wasn't all in on any of it. So very similar to my stepdad. But as I got older and I had full-time jobs, then I was all in and I became like a crazy person. But the crazy person that every employer loves, because now I'm bending over backward for my employer, for the company, for the business, and I'm, not taking vacations. I'm not doing anything for myself. I am just all in on making sure that this business and this boss has everything they need, right? The kind of employee that most employers love. But I didn't do anything that I wanted for me. Nothing. I was so busy chasing them to get my needs filled that I didn't go to my friends' weddings. I had to work. I didn't go to my friends' birthday parties because I had to work. I didn't take vacations because I had to work. And later down the line, after I had been screwed enough times by bosses who were irresponsible and had similar traits as my mom, I decided I'm not fucking doing that anymore. And so the next round of jobs that I had, many part-time jobs. There was one point when I had 5 jobs, 6 if you include my business that I was running on the side. But I liked it. It was safe. It was secure. It was casual. Not any one of those jobs filled my needs, but they were just like my stepdad. Easy, fun, comfortable, secure, but not enough to fill my needs. And so that model continued. And then let's talk about business. So if you're an entrepreneur, this one's important, because most of my adult life, actually, maybe from the time I was 26 or 7, maybe, I had a business. But I also had my regular job. My business was the thing that I loved. The regular job was the thing that I was clamoring for to keep my needs met. The regular job was like my mom, so it would always come first. I would put everything ahead of that. I would work really hard. I would put off everything that I wanted, that I needed. And my business was like my stepdad. It was casual, but not enough to make me stable, not enough to fill all my needs. Like it felt stable. But so I can, in that, because my business was the similar thing energetically as my stepdad, I had to keep it that way. And the dynamic I kept for many, many years, decades, I think, was the main job that I like bent over backward for, and then my business that was casual but never fully filled my needs. And there came a point when I knew that I had to make my business work, that I was done with my regular job. I had to make the business work. So I had to like cut off mom essentially and make stepdad work. But now I have to get stepdad to be the thing that fills all my needs. But stepdad, AKA my business, and my businesses were always passion businesses. My business was casual. How do I move it from casual to everything that I need, to taking care of my full needs? How do I make it go from stepdad to mom? But if it goes from stepdad to mom, it means I'm going to start acting like I acted with mom. I'm going to be anxious. I'm going to be always worried about what I'm going to lose. I'm going to always freak out about the money and how my needs are going to get taken away. And so I'm going to operate that way. And I did. I was be on a sales call. And in the back of my head, I'm like, oh my God, I just have to bend to make them happy, whatever, blah, 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 blah. And you can't do that. You got to be able to hold yourself, and you got to not be attached to the outcome. It doesn't work otherwise. And if it does, you probably end up with clients that are just as anxious as you. And so for me, the challenge, I was right when I said, I need to let go of my regular job and make this business work, because at the time I wasn't in a relationship anymore. So I didn't have this reflection of how do I work through this thing, this pattern, this model of reality, this original cage that I was in, which is casual, is stable, but not everything you need. And the thing that's supposed to provide for your needs is unstable and always pulling away and always slipping through the cracks. Your needs are never going to be met. So how do I change that? And so I didn't have a relationship to work that dynamic out in anymore. So now it was just my business. And well, when we're talking about basic needs, you've got to put food on the table. You've got to put a roof over your head. So there was this impetus to have to figure it out. The problem is a lot of people are working on their business to make it get better. But if you have a model, if your early model of reality, if the life you grew up in was anything similar to mine, where you were chasing and chasing and chasing a parent who was standoffish and pushing you away, you're going to do the same with your business. And you cannot grow a business from that energy. You cannot grow a relationship from that energy. That first love, the first guy that I thought I was going to marry, that relationship failed. And now I'm sure, he played his role, but I played my role in stopping to grow the relationship, because that at that point where you would grow into it, right, moving it from casual to the next level, I went into anxious how things worked with my mom and behaving in that way. And when you do that, you chokehold the growth of anything. Now, if you have somebody constantly like, oh, disappointed when you want to do something for yourself, that's going to close off the relationship. If you're disappointed when somebody wants to do something for themselves, it's going to chokehold the relationship. And in business, it's the same thing. So if you're in that anxious, like, oh my God, I got to figure out exactly what it is that it needs to be done to make this business work, and you're coming from this energy, so you're chasing, you're doing all the coaching things, you're hiring all the coaches, you're doing everything that they say, you're following their rules, but you're coming at it from this place of, I'm trying to get this thing to save me and take care of my needs. And if I'm running around trying to get something to take care of my needs, I'm not actually growing or building a damn thing. You know, that old saying, if you build it, they will come. And I'm sure a lot of people have built things, but I'm building the thing. Why aren't they coming? It's because of the energy and the intention behind it. If you are building it so that they come, they will not come. If you're building it so that you get XYZ, you will not get XYZ. Or you might, but it's just going to fuel the same pattern. You're going to be like, oh, now I need to do more. Now I need to do more. Now I need to do more. And so maybe your business has done really well, but you're still constantly thinking about how you need to do more and how it's never enough. And you're thinking like, why am I so anxious? Why am I so stressed out? Why am I so miserable running my business that I loved and now I can't stand? And even though I have millions and millions of dollars, it doesn't feel like it's enough. Look at your childhood. Look at your early model of reality. Because your business is just a placeholder for one of your parents, one of your caregivers, one of your family members. Your business is a thing that provides needs. Your job is a thing that provides needs. Your relationship is a thing that provides needs. Whether it be love, freedom, peace, safety, joy. If you weren't allowed to have joy as a kid, you're not going to be allowed to have joy in your business, right? I was allowed to have joy with my stepdad, but only when it's casual, right? Stepdad is casual. No joy with mom. As soon as it's committed, I am not allowed to enjoy it. The rules that you were given form the rules of your life. They form the original cage, the original invisible cage. And until you can recognize that you're just playing out those early dynamics everywhere in your life, you're going to continue to repeat them. And sure, you might change jobs, change relationships, change businesses. And for a while in the beginning, it will probably seem really great. Because in the beginning, it requires of you that you step outside of that original cage because it's new and it's unfamiliar. And when it's new and unfamiliar, you have to do it differently. But as soon as you figure out the lay of the land, then you slide back into the old ways, into what is familiar. It's just like moving to a new neighborhood. If you move to a new neighborhood, in the beginning, you're very aware, you're very conscious, you're very present, trying to figure out where everything is. And then after a little while, you kind of know where everything is, and you can drive to the store or walk to the store and not even remember the path that you walked, that you just walked, because you're just looped into this unconscious behavior. And so one of the things about this unconscious behavior is that it's running your life, and it has these rules, these original cages of how everything works. And so if how things worked when you were young is not how you want them to work now, you're going to have to do some work. And depending on how intensely different the world you grew up in was from the world that you want, the life that you want, that work is going to be, it's going to require more. You know, at one point I labeled myself as an unconscious mind expert, subconscious mind expert, and I am. But what I realized at that time is I was just helping people change one identity for another, but it was still within the framework of the original cage. Until you dismantle the original cage, you're going to continue to repeat the dynamics and the way that you felt in that original cage. And yes, it will grow and it will shift a little bit. Most people, most generations, if you look generation to generation, every generation does better, and they have a better life than the generation before most of the time, unless there's some crazy trauma stuff that comes in. But it's still just a little bit bigger. You know, there's the story about fleas. If you put fleas into a jar and you put the lid on, after 30 minutes, you know, and fleas, they like to jump. So after 30 minutes with the lid on, you can take the lid off and they'll never jump out of the jar. And in fact, that programming is so strong that the next generation of fleas will also not jump out of the jar. And so a lot of people's original cage isn't even from their caregivers. It was from the caregivers before, from the caregivers before, from the caregivers before. So just like those fleas, nobody's jumping over that thing. And so a lot of times, generation to generation, everything looks better on paper. I have more money. I have a college education. I have my own business. I have a marriage that lasted, et cetera, et cetera. But the way everybody feels is the same. Because that original cage is not about the things that you have. The original cage is about the dynamics and the way of being and the way of acting and operating in the world and the way of feeling, the way you feel in the world. And until you can change that at a deep level, at a subconscious level, even deeper than what most people think of as subconscious, like deep level. Until you can change that, you're going to continue to repeat the same dynamic. And again, when something is new, things will be great. That's why some people, like ADHD people, right? I need variety. I get bored. Blah, blah, blah. As soon as I get bored, because what happens when you get bored, you're hitting that threshold of where everything's going to fall back into the pattern of the original cage. And so you can't actually see anything through because you keep changing to the new, changing to the new. And the new is great. And the new feels good because when you're in the new, when you're in a dynamic that is not familiar, you are not operating from that original cage. But after a little while, you figure it out. And as soon as you figure it out, your brain will be like, oh, okay, now we figured it out. We're going to morph it and fit it into that reality that we know. And so that's what keeps happening. So if you have, like, if you had a lot of crazy trauma, you had a lot of like absentee parents, whether they were absentee emotionally or physically, if you had this dynamic where you didn't feel at peace and all your needs were fully met, the process of you getting your needs met is not going to feel that way. If it felt anxious and scary and like you were never enough and all of that stuff. So as you continue to grow, you're going to keep hitting that. But it's always going to revert back to that original cage unless you know how to dismantle the original cage. So I hope this was useful. I hope that you can see some of your own patterns and your own stuff in this. so that awareness, so that you can be aware, because being aware is the first step to dismantling the original cage. You have to see it before you can take it down. And I, of course, help people with dismantling the original cage. There's a few ways, lots of ways to get involved. I have weekly clarity calls every Wednesday, 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern. You can check the link and join up for that. There's Zoom calls, group calls, and but only come if you're willing to go deep and look at the truth. And firewalking events, I have other transformational events and coaching, all of those things. So just reach out to me if any of those things sound interesting to you. And you know, the thing about being the wolf, it's about accessing the truth, the essence of who you are, so that you can create a life that you love, so that you can have a business that's fun and free and profitable, so you can have connected and deep and loving relationships. And so your health habits become a want to. But you can only do that when you're operating from the true essence of who you are, the free you without the cage. I want that for you. I want that for everybody, because I know that when you operate from the truth of who you are, humanity evolves. We all benefit from it. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all next time on Be the Wolf. Bye.